nothing can derail an athlete's career quite like a major injury. First thing that comes to my mind exists outside of the baseball realm. It's Derrick Rose for the Chicago Bulls, a truly devastating injury to an elite player, to a truly dynamic guy on the basketball court. But for baseball, there are many instances where players seem to not be themselves when they come back from injury. The kid, Ken Griffey Jr. Everyone always has this sentiment around him that had he not been injured, he would have hit over 800 home runs. He would be the GOAT of baseball, if you will. And if I'm being honest with you, that sentiment is not entirely wrong. Ken Griffey Jr., the kid, as we all know him, is one of the most polarizing athletes in all of baseball. One of the most famous and popular athletes in the sports world. For baseball, he's an icon to many. Many people growing up, especially in my generation, mimicked the kid. They wanted to be in the backyard swinging the bat. I know I was back there. Even though I'm right-handed, I would still practice my lefty swing. It's god-awful, but I could definitely do a great Griffey impression if someone handed me a bat right now. And after taking a look at Ken Griffey Jr.'s stats and taking a look at how many games he truly missed over the years due to his injuries in Cincinnati, I'm kind of aligning with a lot of the people that say that he would be the GOAT, that he would have the home run record. He would be the best player ever to grace the baseball field. Obviously, his 99.3 or however percent vote into the Hall of Fame, almost unanimous, is really, really good. However, had he not had as many injuries during his time in Cincinnati, I really think that 99% blah, blah, blah could have been 100%. He would have been unanimous. So today, we're going to take a look at some what-if situations. What if Ken Griffey Jr. really never got hurt as bad in Cincinnati? Now, a lot of these what-if stats I'm about to show you are just a straight line here. There's not going to be a drop-off or a build-up or anything like that from his age 30 season to his age 40 season, because it just makes it a lot easier when telling the story of these stats. Before I show you these what if stats, if you will, I do need to kind of go over Ken Griffey Jr.'s career in two different parts. The first part is his 11 years spent in Seattle from 1989 to 1999. At age 19, Ken Griffey Jr. made his major league debut, and in that season, he hit 16 home runs, drove in 61 RBIs, and scored 61 runs, stole 16 bags, had a 264 average with a 108 OPS plus. To say that Ken Griffey Jr. was already destined for greatness is an understatement. Ken Griffey Jr. would continue to develop and come into his own offensively at the plate, where in 1993, he finally broke out and hit over 30 home runs for the first time in his career at 45 home runs, and he drove in 109 RBIs that year while scoring 113 times. There's also no slouch in the outfield as well. That's 9 straight gold gloves from him from 1990 to 1999. Ken Griffey Jr. would finally break his MVP streak, where in 1997, he took home the MVP award, hitting 56 home runs and driving in 147 RBIs. He was absolutely electric at the plate. Now, these numbers are not fully sustainable. We can't expect Ken Griffey Jr. from age 27 to age like 33 for him to be hitting home runs in the high 40s every single year. It's never a guarantee with baseball. However, with the injuries that Ken Griffey Jr. sustained, hitting 22 home runs in 2001, 8 home runs in 2002, and only 13 in 2003, all because he missed a lot of time there, it kind of puts his career stats in a hole. Ken Griffey Jr. was one of the most potent offensive weapons when healthy of all time. And I don't know if I can put it any more simply than that. Speaking of simply, make sure to gear up for the Seattle Mariners 2023 season with simplyseattle.com. Head over to their page, click on the Mariners collection, and pick out your favorite merchandise item there. And make sure when you're at checkout to use code MOJO10 for 10% off your order. We are super excited to be working with Simply Seattle all season long. Make sure to head on over there to simplyseattle.com for all of your Seattle Mariner merchandise needs. Ken Griffey Jr. definitely could have had a little bit better of a resume when it was all said and done. So I took Ken Griffey Jr.'s 162 game average from 1989 to 1999, and also the 162 game average for his second half of his career from Cincinnati to Chicago for a season, and finally with Seattle, and I kind of combined them into one lump average. So if Ken Griffey Jr. were to play 162 games or an average for the entire season for the rest of his career from 2000 to 2010, his lines every single year was that he was going to get 682 plate appearances, 590 at-bats, he would score 99 times, have 166 hits, he would hit 31 doubles, 2 triples, 38 home runs, 109 RBIs would be driven in, he'd steal 10 bags, he would hit 276, 363, 518 with an 881 OPS and a 129 OPS plus. Those numbers are not nearly as good as his time spent at the beginning of his career, so I kind of used that as a way to nerf Ken Griffey Jr. essentially. But with these what-ifs, it's hard to argue that Ken Griffey Jr. would not be the greatest player of all time. If we did 10 years of him playing 162 games with those stats every single year, his final tallies would put him 7th in most runs scored at all time at 2,149. Just looking at counting stats for the most part here, 3,567 hits for 5th all time. He would have the most home runs ever at 811. He would be the only player ever to ever hit over 800 home runs, and he would finish with 2,356 RBIs, which would be first as well all time, putting him ahead of Hank Aaron. Now, this is not necessarily realistic at all, but it's just kind of fun to look at it, how truly great Ken Griffey Jr. could have been on a 162 game average if that were humanly possible. Now, I also took another portion here of a what if scenario. If Ken Griffey Jr. could play 162 games, but only take his 162 game average from 2000 to 2010, had he been able to play a bit more, his averages during that 11-year span, if he were to play 162 games, would have been 659 plate appearances, 567 at-bats, 86 runs scored, 148 hits, 29 doubles, 1 triple, 33 home runs, and 98 RBIs. His slash line would consist of a 254 average, a 347 OBP, a 472 slug, an 819 OPS, and a 111 OPS plus. Ken Griffey Jr. still 11 points above league average there, even with his down years and his more hurt years. Those stats still put him in arguably, I'd say, GOAT territory as well. So for that 11-year span, Ken Griffey Jr. is going to hit 33 home runs, 98 RBIs, and drive in 86 runs and have 148 hits on a season. Those counting stats at the end would put him 9th all-time in runs scored at 2,004. He would be 11th all-time in hits at 3,375. He would be at 2,227 RBIs, which would put him 2nd behind Hank Aaron. And finally, he would be at 763 home runs, 1 more home run than Barry Bonds for the all-time lead there. These stats, they're impossible to predict. It's not realistic in the slightest, but this what-if scenario truly would cement Ken Griffey Jr. as the greatest player of all time, because Ken Griffey Jr., had he not had season-ending injuries in 2002 to 2004, who knows what could have happened with him at the end of the day. There's no way that we can quantify Ken Griffey Jr.'s career as complete because of all the time that he missed. And of course, there are injuries that are also kind of hard to bounce back from. A hamstring injury that completely tore the hamstring off of the, just a gruesome injury. I don't want to talk about it because it just makes my skin crawl a little bit. But it was a really awful injury that he sustained in 2004, but yet he still continued to persevere. He still continued to bounce back. And so I took it a step further and I made a couple more stats. Some realistic stats, ones where he's not playing in 162 games. So from 1989 to 1999, Ken Griffey Jr. averaged playing 140 games per season. That's including the shortened season, and in 1995 where he only played in 72 games. So I'm gonna knock him some points there, but he only averaged 140 games per season, which is really good. From 2000 to 2010, he played in 103 games on an average. Now I took the average of those two numbers and it was 122 games per season, so I made 2 more chart of stats for Ken Griffey Jr. One called realistic positive, similar to what if positive, and one that's realistic negative, similar to what if negative. One is, just better stats. That's why it's labeled that way. And for both of these realistic positive and realistic negative stats, I did have a control season, a season where he played a similar amount of games for both of these groups. For realistic positive, I had Ken Griffey Jr. playing in 130 games in seasons that he didn't even come close to those margins there. His 2005 season was the one that I thought was the most fair. So in terms of plate appearances and at-bats, Ken Griffey Jr. would have 550 plate appearances and 491 at-bats across 130 games for seasons 2001 through 2004, 2006, and then 2009 and 2010. Any season where he played more or close to 130 games, I left them the same. So for example, 2000, where he played 145 games, it's his first season in Cincinnati, and he had 631 plate appearances, 520 at-bats, 100 runs scored, 141 hits, 40 home runs, 118 RBIs. I did not touch that season. I let it be as it was. So I took the home run percentage per plate appearance as a benchmark here, and that is how I calculated how many home runs that he would hit. So I multiplied the plate appearances by his home run percentage, and that is how many home runs he would have. So in 2001, he would have 555 plate appearances because I needed to adjust it higher. And in 2001, his home run percentage was 5.3%. So if you take 555 plate appearances, multiply it by 5.3%, you get around 29 home runs. So in 2001, Ken Griffey Jr.'s final stat line would have been, counting stats primarily here, 80 runs, 140 hits, 29 home runs, and 88 148 RBIs. If you guys can kind of follow where we're going, it continues the trend downward. And I have the seasons that I changed in italics. I have the seasons that stayed the same in bold, and my control season here is highlighted in gold, bold, and italicized. Now, with a lot of these realistic positive stats here, Ken Griffey Jr. would find himself in the top 100 for home runs every single season, aside from 2010. There are a lot of times here where Ken Griffey Jr. is right above average, or pretty far above the average here for home runs. He was never going to be touching the highest echelon here for home runs ever again after his incredible 1997 season. However, these home run leaders here at Sosa, Bonds, A-Rod, everything like that, I don't know how we got Adrian Beltre here at 2004, but looking at these home runs here, Ken Griffey Jr. definitely would be in the top 100 a bit more and a little bit higher on this list than we would see him with his original stats. So his career totals here from realistic positive, that's 130 games per year if you were to continue to play. Ken Griffey Jr. would have finished 15th all-time in runs scored at 1,870, 22nd all-time with 3,132 hits. He would be 6th all-time in RBIs at 2,043, and he would be 4th all-time in home runs at 704. Ken Griffey Jr. would have joined the 700 club for home runs. How sick would that have been for the kid? But there's also the other half of this coin here where Ken Griffey Jr. isn't playing that many games, where you gotta have to take the average here and go a little bit lower and say that he's only gonna play 115 games per year. That was my benchmark for my realistic negative stats. The negative effects of aging and overall just degeneration from playing the game so long. Ken Griffey Jr. 115 games in seasons 2002 through 2004 and 2010. So 2000, 2001, 05 through 09 all stayed the same for Ken Griffey Jr. And the benchmark season here is his 2006 season, where he played in 109 games, had 472 plate appearances, 428 at-bats, and so same math applies here. So his 2002 final line for stats, if he played in 115 games, would have been 472 plate appearances, 428 at-bats, 45 runs, 113 hits, 16 home runs, and 50 RBI. So taking a look at his home run percentage in 2002, it was the lowest of his career in Cincinnati. He had a bit lower later in his career, but 3.5% was definitely his lowest. So 2002 would have been a very down year for the kid. Finishing it out here, there was a little bit of a caveat that I used for 2010. Ken Griffey Jr. only played the first month of the season, and he did not hit a single home run. So his home run percentage, I just kind of cheated and used his home run percentage with the Chicago White Sox for the second half of the 2008 season, which was 2%. So respectively, he still only hit 9 home runs in the 115 game season, but I can understand why that might seem a little out of place. Now, going over his realistic negative stats, if you will, he would finish 22nd all-time with 1,781 runs. He would hit 672 home runs, putting him at 6th all-time. He would have 1,954 RBIs for 8th all-time, putting him right in front of Stan Musial, who was, as most of you guys know if you know much about Ken Griffey Jr., him and Stan Musial were born in the same town in Donora, Pennsylvania. And I saved this one for last here for this counting stat. Ken Griffey Jr. would finish his career with exactly 3,000 hits. Absolutely, unequivocally poetic end to a career there, and this being the most realistic kind of end for Ken Griffey Jr. at 115 games per year from 2000 to 2010. I think that's very, very doable if injuries do not bite him as hard as they did. Finishing with 3,000 hits, again, this might cement him as the GOAT. It'd be really, really close. I'm not sure this one quite puts him over the edge here. Now, this video was not meant to slander Ken Griffey Jr. in any way, shape, or form. Injuries happen to the best of them, and there's no doubt in my mind that Ken Griffey Jr. is still one of the greatest to ever touch the baseball field.
I don't believe it! It just continues! My, oh my!
To Junior. Swung on line to the right field for a base hit! Junior has won the ball game! My, oh
Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and please leave a like and subscribe if you guys are new. We've got a bunch of Mariners and MLB content coming your way for the 2023 season. Again, thank you guys for watching this one, and check out this video on the screen right now about another Mariners legend. Have a great rest of your day, and go Mariners.